You're the Undertale guy.
No, I'm not the Undertale guy. I'm not the Undertale guy. I just like Undertale. And no, I'm not. They just have good encounter design. I'm not the Undertale guy. I'm the TTRPG guy. I talk about tabletop roleplay games. Yep, I'm back on my bullshit again. I promise there's a reason I keep returning to Undertale and talking about it specifically, and it's because its encounter designs are amazing, but also they're character focused. They really focus in on the characters themselves and create some interesting moral battlegrounds that I think are perfect for TTRPGs. And today specifically, we're talking about everybody's favorite fish lesbian, Undyne. Now, Undyne is one of my favorite characters in the game and is a fan favorite for a good reason. Not only is she one of the more difficult encounters in the game, if you do the Genocide route specifically, things get really interesting. That is also everybody's opportunity to leave if you don't want spoilers on Undertale. I really encourage you to play this game first. It's amazing. But for those of you who are still with me, I assume you know what you're getting into, so let's start. In the Genocide route, your job is to kill literally everybody. That's kind of why that word is there, right? And so in this entire route, you go through everybody that you see and make sure that nobody's left. But this changes with one specific NPC, Monster Kid. Now, Monster Kid is an endearing character, I think. You see, you might not know this, but the most watched video on this entire channel is actually a short talking about Monster Kid, in which case I imply that it is nice to have a character like this to give some context to the party. However, according to the comments, a lot of people did not like Monster Kid, in which case you guys have really bad taste, but I love Monster Kid specifically. And he's the one character who you run into in this entire time that manages to get away. And that's because as you try and strike at him, something happens. Undyne jumps in the way, taking a fatal blow. In this moment, Monster Kid has to run and gets out of there. But Undyne, Undertale Undyne. Toby Fox, fuck you for making their names so goddamn similar. But Undyne takes the blow. And in this moment, we see her beginning to pass away, but something starts to happen. She rises up again. This feeling whelms up within her and she begins to feel determination. She rises against you and ascends to a new form, Undyne the Undyne. Now, apart from being one of the coolest encounters in the game and with a soundtrack that absolutely slaps, it is also an absolutely incredible moment of facing down the character for their decisions. See, for those of you guys who haven't played the game, Genocide routes are typically pretty easy up until this point. It's just your job to kill everybody, and the more people you kill, the more LV and XP you get, love and experience, whatever. The more that you continue to get that, the stronger you become. It becomes easier and easier to kill people, and nobody really stands a chance against you. But this is the moment where that changes. Undyne the Undyne is a much harder encounter than the original Undyne and presents a unique challenge because it asks you if you really want to continue doing this. It's essentially a checkpoint, really checking if you want to continue killing all of your favorite characters. And so if you translate this into a TTRPG sense, this is an amazing moment of challenging the morals of your players. Now, in the original short that I made on this, I implied that this is a great check for murder hobos. And I'm not going to talk about murder hobos today, but instead I'm simply going to show how this is an amazing example to play against the rest of the parties. See, like I said, Undyne is this checkpoint of asking if the player is morally okay with what's going on. And whether your players are doing things that you consider morally okay or not, which is a whole different conversation, it's still a very interesting time of asking the players to reevaluate their characters' motivations. Consider it like this. Imagine your players are going through their campaign and they have been going along the storyline and the general quest because, I don't know, that's what they're supposed to do. But then they meet this character, this paladin, who they end up killing, but they stand back up. They refuse to die. They are so determined to stop the party. They consider the party the absolute villains of this story, whether that's true or not, to the point where the players actually have to reevaluate their character's decisions. Have they done something wrong? Are they on the right path? It's this question of how determined are you to stick with what your character's done? Is your character motivated to do this? Which is such a morally interesting thing to ask basically any party. See, I have two different groups I run for. One group which would 100% absolutely without a doubt stand 1000% by their decisions and consider this paladin to be the dumbest NPC they've ever run into in their life. Meanwhile, the other ones would start to reconsider. Now, they might continue forward and insist that they're correct, but after the battle, they'd wonder. They'd wonder whether they were right or not. And both of those groups are okay reactions. Neither of them are wrong. Instead, it is simply this way of showing the party where they're at, what they think they're going to do, and how the world may actually see them. See, this paladin will consider them to be the villains, whether they are or not. But the very fact that somebody thought that they were the villains, the very fact that somebody thought they were the hero of the story, will be an interesting contextualization of what's happened in the campaign so far. Like I said, Undyne is this moment of a moral checkpoint of asking the player if they're okay continuing to kill everybody they're doing. And I don't think you necessarily have to do that with your group. However, being this moment of asking the group if they are willing to continue to kill to go where they're going to go, they are willing to fight to do this against somebody who genuinely thinks they're doing the right thing, well, that's interesting. That's fascinating, isn't it? It is such an interesting moral quandary to present to them. And not only that, the best battles are ones where the battle is kind of in the background. It's a backdrop for something more important. Who has the moral high ground? Who is ethically correct here? Now, bringing ethics into TTRPGs is always just a big can of worms that I'm unwilling to open in a video about Undertale Undyne. Okay, I'm not going to do that specifically here. However, what I am going to do is present this as an encounter to present any kind of interesting emotional situation. It is a way of presenting things to the players and then showing that sometimes who wins the battle is not who had the most hit points at the end of it. It's who objectively stood by their morals, who stood by their character, who stood by their decisions. Sometimes that is much more interesting than who was able to roll more dice and do more damage. And that's so much more fun. Now, Undertale is a very lovable game with a very unique art style and way of setting up encounters. And if you want to set up encounters like this, well, you'll need some good equipment, which then introduces the sponsor for today, Geek Games. Geek Games is this incredible TTRPG company that gives specifically 2D minis that you can use anywhere on the fly. The best part about them is the fact that you can put them in these reusable pouches, seal them up, and carry them basically anywhere. I don't usually play my D&D games at my table. I usually go to somebody else's house and then have to transport all the minis, which becomes incredibly exhausting. These, however, make it much more simple. You simply take out the 2D mini, stick it in the reusable base, and you can set them anywhere on the fly. Then once you're done, pack them all up and put them in the smallest pouch on your backpack. Seriously, they're that easy to transport. And the art style on them is so cute and amazing and stylized, just like Undertale. So if you want to use them, please go to the link in the description below and use the discount code there to get a coupon on your order. I'm really struggling.
We're leaving that in the ad because it's funny.
Okay, go to the link in the description, please, because I can't talk and I can't keep doing this because I got the bad words in the bad brain. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Back to the video. Thank you to the sponsor. Now, the last portion I want to talk about with Undyne is specifically the mechanics of it all. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with the mechanics, but it really depends on the system that you're using. A lot of people like to try and translate mechanics into D&D 5e because it's a very flexible system. But you have some other systems which aren't quite so flexible, but it's still pretty easy to do. The main mechanic of Undyne is that she has the ability to make you have to focus in different directions in order to block and defend yourself. That's a pretty good mechanic, but doesn't really translate so well into TTRPGs. So instead, I would really have it focused on whatever way your character is facing. No matter what system you're using, typically where you're facing is something that you can control. And so have her attack from different directions. Have her teleport around the battlefield and attack from these different directions, and they have to try and predict which way she's going to go. If the players eventually begin to face those different directions and stand back to back, they can then defend much easier from the attacks. If it was something like D&D or Pathfinder, I would simply have it that if they faced the right direction where the attack was going to come from, they have a bonus, either a higher AC or maybe a little bit more hit points, something like that. Adding unique and interesting encounters with unique mechanics can be really fun. When you add that alongside the moral and ethical quandaries that come with this battle, it suddenly becomes an encounter impossible to forget. Now, I would make sure it is led up to. Don't just drop this out of the fly. If you do so, your players are just going to sit there going, what is happening? Why are the mechanics different in this fight? Why is this NPC so insane? And why are they constantly trying to fight us? Seriously, I would really make sure that this NPC is not one who just shows up out of nowhere, or it will just seem like some sort of fanatic rather than an actually interesting encounter for them to have to get past. Now, there are going to be some parties which are going to try and reason with this individual, and I will simply leave that up to you. Do you believe that their actions have actually been morally justified to the point where maybe this person is wrong? Well then, I don't know, maybe consider that. Reasoning shouldn't ever be out of the question for D&D parties unless they are facing somebody who is so morally opposed to them there is no way there could ever be a way to reconcile. And if that's the case, it's still a very interesting encounter, but make sure to emphasize that. Don't just let it go by the wayside. So if you do all of that, I think it can honestly be an incredible encounter and very fun, so long as it's all handled properly and led up to in the appropriate amount. If you want to watch more videos about TTRPGs and Undertale, you can go right here where I have a few more of them because I keep doing this and I'll probably do it again someday. No one can stop me.
Undertale guy!
I'm not the Undertale guy.